Thank you very much, Maya. Again, this is Shiori Okazaki. I'm the Director of Communications at the U.S. Japan Council. So here I'm joined by Yuiko Tanaka-Cervantes, Evelyn Tokuyama, and then Kira Tashima. So all three of them are young professionals in the LA region, and they worked throughout the United States and Japan in various careers. So we're going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves, and I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll open the floor to questions from you. So if I may ask you to briefly introduce yourselves, your profession or your career, just a little bit, and then your connection to USJC and Tomodachi, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Yuiko Tanaka-Cervantes, and I work for MUFG Union Bank. I joined corporate communication team last May, and my primary role at the bank is focused on U.S. Japan bilateral communications, and I also manage Japan-related CSR activities such as MUFG Tomodachi programs. I was born and raised in Japan, just like most of you guys, and this is my third time moving to the U.S. I recently moved back in the States 4 years ago, and when I first came to from Japan, I was 16 years old as a Rotary exchange student. I had a scholarship, and I spent 1 year in Washington State High School. I went back to Japan, finished my high school, came back here for college. I studied anthropology at Sonoma State University in Northern California. I went back to Japan after graduating university, worked there for 10 years, and met my husband there and moved back here 4 years ago. So I have a lot of experience working both in Japan and US. So I'm looking forward to talking to you guys and answering some of the questions that you guys have.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Evelyn Tokuyama. I was born and raised in Orange County, so about an hour south of here. And I'd been to Japan as a child growing up with my family, but I didn't learn to speak Japanese as a child. So when I was a university student, I went to the University of California, Irvine, UC Irvine. So I know a couple of you are studying at UC schools. Had an amazing time. I studied international relations and also management. So I took some business courses. And I studied abroad actually in Tokyo, Japan. I was at Waseda University for the summer, and I was studying Japanese language there, and I absolutely loved it. So I know that many of you're all doing one-year programs, so you have a lot more time than I did, but that was actually what sparked my strong interest in Japan, and I ended up going back there to live and to work for 6 years. I recently moved back to Southern California a few months ago. So my professional background is in education. I originally went over to Japan to teach English, and I think a few of you were interested in becoming English teachers. So you might have some questions that I can help answer. And then I transitioned into communications. I worked for an American PR agency in Tokyo, and I know a couple of you are at Keio University. I'm not sure which campus you're at, but my office was in Mita, so very close to that campus. And then my connection with the U.S. Japan Council is I was part of the Emerging Leaders Program, which is also under the Tomodachi umbrella. I was in the class of 2015, so it's when the annual conference was in Tokyo for the first time. And then after that, I've just continued to stay involved through the Japan Regional Planning Committee, and I'm also on the Emerging Leaders Program Steering Committee. So nice to meet you all.
Good morning. My name is Kira Tashima, and I'm really pleased to be here and speak with you. I live here in Los Angeles, not too far from downtown, actually, and I work in downtown Los Angeles as a lawyer with the firm Shepherd Mullen. In my legal practice, I represent real estate developers. They call me a land use attorney. So maybe even driving around downtown, you've seen a lot of cranes and a lot of construction. And so I'm the attorney that represents those builders to help them get the necessary permits and to interact with the city of Los Angeles and its various municipal departments to get permits to do that. Another cross-section of what I do is environmental law. So I'm very sort of versed in the state regulations around that, federal regulations and city regulations that relate to environmental clearances to build properties here in the city. I went to University of California, San Diego. So as Evelyn alluded to, you guys, a lot of you are at the UC schools. I think maybe one of you is at UC San Diego. Yes. So I'm interested to know how your experience has been in La Jolla. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and my first introduction to the mainland here in California was La Jolla at UC San Diego. I did my legal studies here in Los Angeles at the University of Southwestern, not too far from here. It's located in Koreatown, if any of you have gone to Koreatown. In the historic building, it's a Bullocks-Wilshire building, very beautiful building on Wilshire and Vermont. I've been sort of involved with U.S. Japan Council through, like Evelyn, the Tomodachi umbrella program called the Emerging Leaders Program. I was part of the class of 2014, which held its conference in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I'm from. So that was a real pleasure to go back home and be a part of that. I don't think any of you are interested in a legal career based on your bios, but I'm happy to sort of talk about some of the businesses that I represent, because as part of my legal representation of these companies, I learn a lot about different companies around the country, as well as international companies as well. So if you have questions about any of that, and perhaps you are interested in sort of legal studies and just didn't list it in your bios, but I'm happy to talk about sort of the transition between undergraduate studies and then moving on to maybe a master's program or a doctorate program, whatever you might be interested in. I did take some time off between my undergraduate studies and going on to law school, and I can talk up to that, sort of why I chose to take 2 years off and what I did during that time. So happy to be here, and I look forward to learning more about you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, I'd like to ask the panelists, so what sort of activity during college was useful to your career? Just to explain a little bit about myself, I was an English major, and people kept telling me, what are you going to do with that? And I've noticed that some of you are literature majors, so I'm sure you really empathize with where I'm coming from. Like, you really enjoy maybe reading books or writing, but how do you transfer that into a career? And sometimes it's something like an internship or a job you happen to take. And for me, I was interested in journalism for a while, but I didn't get any internships, unfortunately. But I happened to get an internship on the college campus called the Office of Public Affairs. So it's basically PR, and I really enjoyed doing that. I got to write a lot of articles, interview a lot of people, and I think that was the beginning of a career in communications. So I just fell into that because I was rejected by every other internship that was in journalism. So I'd like to ask the panelists to share their stories about that too.
So I study anthropology, and as Shioli-san said, I got a lot of what are you going to do with anthropology. I know it's an interesting topic, but what kind of job are you going to get? For me, as coming from Japan and studying here as an international student, I think the overall experience was very, how do you say? My mind's not working. I have horrible allergy to that. I can't articulate what I'm thinking. Like having a global perspective, I think that was, I heard Irene mention that earlier today, but I mean, throughout this experience, you gain, I have expanded my horizon, my worldview, and those global perspectives that I gained throughout, my study here, I think that kind of gave me a path to getting a job in the future. And also, all the people that I met throughout my studies, like my friends, my professor, my boss at my part time job, everybody, I think having that connection, having that network, and being keeping in touch with them, I think it was, looking back, I think it was one of the good thing that happened during my study here, that which led me different kind of job back in Japan. Yeah.
So I think very similar to Yuiko-san, my study abroad experience, even though it was so short, it was only 6 weeks. So I was only in Japan from July to the second week of August. I never expected that it would have such a profound impact on me, and that it would actually drive me to move and to live and to work in a different country where English was not the mother tongue. But going kind of back to Shiori's question, so my major, international studies at UC Irvine, we were required to study a foreign language. So my high school did not offer Japanese or any Asian languages. They only had French, Spanish, and Latin. So I studied Spanish in high school. But in college, when I had the opportunity to study Japanese, I kind of jumped at that. So I started from the very beginning, a, I, U, E, O, from hiragana. And then studying abroad in Japan, that also accelerated, the learning curve. So I think that was a really important activity that I did as a student that helped me in my career. And also, I think your extracurricular activities, I know all of you are here, so you're very invested in your education and you take it very seriously. So I'm sure that you're involved in various clubs and sports. I encourage that. I think that it's really important. I would say the things that I did in undergrad, they were kind of all over the place. I volunteered at the Health Education Center. I was a peer educator, and we were focused on making the campus completely smoke-free. So at the time, there were still designated smoking areas on campus. And I think a few years ago after I graduated, it actually became 100% smoke-free. So that was really exciting. I was also involved with another peer educator program under the Campus Assault Resources and Education Center. So I peer counseled domestic violence and sexual assault victims. So that was kind of more in the health related area. And then in addition to that, I was involved with this Japanese student organization called JSA. I think some of your schools might have something like that. And that was a really great place for me to meet Japanese students who are studying at UCI, taking English classes and also just regular UCI courses towards their degree to graduate. And I kept in touch with them. I became really good friends with them because they were also here for a year. And then when I moved to Tokyo, it was really great because I got to reconnect with them. So all of those things that I did, they didn't necessarily connect or, lead to an ultimate goal, but it was just what I was interested in and what I was passionate about. So I think if I can give you one piece of advice in terms of activities that you're involved in right now, just pursue what you're interested in. What sparks your curiosity? What are you interested in and passionate about? And go with that, because I think it'll help to kind of add to your overall growth as you finish up school and you start trying to pursue your careers and job interviews and all of that.
So I agree with everything that my fellow panelists have shared with you. So I'll try to just not repeat what they said and just add on. So with my legal career, nothing that I studied in undergrad matters really. So I would focus on the skills. So, for me, reading, writing, analysis, being able to communicate a point,
having confidence in a room of strangers, just sort of the skill sets that you might need just in life, no matter what career you decide to pursue. Just think about the skills that you're acquiring. And I would add, like Evelyn said, in trying to seek those skills, do what makes you happy, what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, because that will show. If you're interviewing with somebody about, a really great internship or a great study abroad experience that you had, that will come through. And they'll see that, hey, this person has a lot of energy. This person has a lot of interest and passion. And that's the type of person they would want to hire, right? So, everybody is so busy, and I think that with the limited time you have with your studies and your family commitments, pick something that really energizes you, something that you're really excited to go and spend that extra time to volunteer for. I will say that having leadership experience is really critical too. So if you, in your, your clubs or, different clinics or volunteer opportunities you have, try to take a leadership role, because that's where you really learn to get the skills that you need to be successful in whatever career you pursue. So while it could be scary, step up, if there's a school election, for example, get involved. Or sometimes something smaller, there could be a committee where there's not an election but you just volunteer, be a co-chair to that committee. Those types of opportunities, I think, really build on the skills that you'll need in the long run. So I'll say, as an undergraduate student, look for those types of opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. And so I wanted to expand from there chronologically and talk about what it was like applying to jobs for the very first time. You apply to internships, of course, and sometimes they're very, very competitive. But I think compared to job applications, it's not as daunting. And I really admire all of your courage in applying to this scholarship and to study abroad programs and even coming here. I think that's a huge, huge step already. But I think the job application period is really daunting because I think, especially in Japan, you might go to interviews where you see a whole lot of other people applying to the similar position and you might doubt yourself. And so I want to ask the panelists how they remain confident. And I think I'd like to start with Yuiko, especially because you've probably applied to jobs in Japan and the application process is a little bit different in the United States. But if Evelyn and Kira could add to that from the US perspective as well, that would be great. Okay.
So during my senior year in United States, I attended this career forum in Boston where all the Japanese students attend, And and at that time, there are so many Japanese international students in the United States. So I go there and then I took a lot of interviews with many different, mostly Japanese companies in which has offices in the United States. I got one job, but that required me to move to Michigan, and the job was not something that lined up with what I really care about. So I decided not to move to Michigan and went back to Japan. So I did not notice at that time, but I was very Americanized after spending 4 years here, 4+ years in the United States. And, when you apply for a job in Japan, it's very, very Japanese. You have to use proper keigo and you have to act very Japanese. And here I came back, have so much opinion on my own and went to interview in this really conservative Japanese company. And of course, I didn't hear a good answer from them. And then I thought, do I really want to work for a company? And I start thinking like, job hunting is kind of like dating. Just because they don't like me, that doesn't mean I'm not qualified for this job. Maybe my personality does not fit with them. So I started applying for American company where there are some Japanese people and maybe American executive. That way I can utilize my English and my experience. So I applied for one American medical company in Tokyo. I went to interview, had a Japanese and English interview, and I was hired on spot. So I think what I learned from my experience was, you want to be comfortable where you work. And if you think that you're a little bit more Americanized, you have different worldview from, people who only, lived in Japan. Maybe you want to look for a job that you can utilize that worldview and, global perspective.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really interesting. Um, so I know many of you want to work in the States. I kind of had the opposite dream. I, was from here and I wanted to live and work in Japan. So actually, obtaining a work visa in Japan is not quite as difficult or cumbersome as it is here. And because I have the Japanese American heritage, I think that also helps move the process along a little bit quicker. But actually, do have one story. So, right after I got back from my study abroad program, I had decided I knew that I wanted to go teach English in Japan. That's kind of the go to career when you don't speak fluent Japanese. There's not very many options. There's not very many jobs that you can do over there if you don't have a strong command of the language. So I wanted to do the JET program, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. So I applied when I was a fourth year student at UCI. I made it to the interview. I interviewed, and then I found out that I didn't get in. So, of course, I was devastated. I was very disappointed because that was my plan. I always had a plan. I was going to graduate, and then I was going to move to Japan and teach English. But it didn't happen. So I graduated, and then an opportunity came up. I met someone who was an ESL teacher in San Francisco, and she was doing a summer school program for ESL students. And they were all of the Asian ethnicity, different ages, different levels of English. Some had no experience with English at all. But it was a great opportunity for me to get some teaching experience under my belt because I decided that I was going to apply to the JET program again. Because that was what I wanted to do, and I don't give up easily. So I did that. It was about 2 months right after graduation that summer. I came back. I completed my application for the JET program, submitted that. I was looking for other jobs. I had an interest in hospitality. So I started to look at different hotels in the area. And I ended up getting an offer from a hotel nearby. So I worked in the reservations and the communications department. So that was a really great experience. But I think that entire time, I still had that desire to go to Japan. So I had a plan B. I applied to JET, but then I said to myself, well, what if I don't get in again this year? So I looked at the different Eikaiwa companies, the English conversation companies in Japan, and I ended up applying to Berlitz, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. They have language centers all over. And I got an offer from them. And I also got into the JET program that second time around. But when I had spent time in Japan, it was really Tokyo that I had fallen in love with, and that was where I wanted to be. And the Berlitz offer was not in Tokyo, but it was in Kanagawa, which is a neighboring prefecture. It's very close. And with the JET program, you never know where you're going to be placed. And typically, you're a little bit, out in the countryside. But I had many friends who did the JET program and were outside of large cities, and they've had a wonderful experience. But my experience, I knew that I wanted it to be near a larger city. So I ended up taking the offer from Berlitz.
And I stayed there for a few years. A few months into it, though, I kind of knew that I wanted to transition into communications. That was a goal that I had set before moving to Japan. And it was confirmed when a few months into teaching, I didn't think that it was really my true passion, per se. So I actually enrolled in Japanese language school while I was working. And I did that for about 8 months to get a solid foundation. Continued teaching, and then I started to apply for jobs, non-teaching related jobs in Tokyo. So kind of in all different sectors. I applied to hotels, I applied to international schools, I applied to retail companies because I worked part-time during my undergrad experience in retail, and tech companies, and nothing really panned out. But I didn't give up. I kept trying. And eventually I met someone that in the US who knew someone in a Tokyo office of the company I ended up working at, Weber Shandwick. So there's an interview opportunity. So I interviewed, 3 times, and I interviewed in Japanese. So it's hard enough to interview, as I'm sure you understand, in your mother tongue, right? Because of all the pressure and the stress. And to interview in a language that you're not perfectly fluent in was really daunting. But I tried my best, and it ended up working out. So that's kind of my experience with job hunting in Japan and the US.
So I guess I'm the outlier in this discussion because I have not lived or worked in Japan. So I can give you an American perspective on job hunting. So when I graduated from UC San Diego, I was interested in the law, but I don't have any lawyers in my family. I don't have any close, friends of the family that are lawyers. So I didn't quite, I wasn't quite convinced that I wanted to commit to the time and expense of going to law school. So I had a plan, and the plan was to get a job at a law firm. Now, I didn't have, like I said, any networks to sort of rely on to get an in at a law firm. So I thought, well, I don't have to practice law. I just need to be around lawyers and be able to sort of see what they do. So let me see how at least I can get my foot in the door. So in doing some research, there is a big market for recruiting lawyers at law firms. So the first position I got was working in the sort of talent development department of a rather large law firm in downtown LA called O'Melveny and Myers. And what I didn't know at the time was it was extremely helpful when it came time for me to job hunt for an actual legal position, because I understood what the talent development department was looking for when they were looking at resumes, when they were going to on-campus interviews at law schools. So spending 2 years in talent development at a large law firm, I at the time I thought, oh, well, I'll just be around lawyers and I can see if they seem happy and they seem like they like their job. But at the end of the day, it really did help me in the big sort of job hunt, which was after law school. What was I going to do? How was I going to, figure out the best way to start my career, which was, something called on-campus interviewing. And I can talk about that. It's very similar, actually, to the Japanese sort of structure. All of the law students get in their suits and they basically bid for interviews with various law firms. And all the law firms come to your campus and they interview you back to back. So one person's in the room, another one's waiting outside, 15-minute interview, done. Okay, next person in. And you're all sort of competing with your friends, right? And you're hoping that you get the position, but you're also hoping that your friend gets a position, and it's a really stressful time. So I can sort of empathize with the job hunting process in Japan in that light. So sometimes you may not think that the position you're going after or the position you end up getting is the one you really wanted, but it's sometimes a stepping stone in the right direction, and you have to maybe have the confidence that you're at least putting yourself and setting yourself up to get to where you want to go. So while I wasn't smart enough to really understand that when I was looking at my first job out of undergrad, it all ended up working out. So I will say that sometimes, you think you're sort of off path, but there is a reason behind it all.
Thank you so much. So listening to their stories, listening to your stories, I can tell that sometimes study abroad experience is already a really life-changing opportunity. And when you go back to your home, you seem a little bit different from the friends and classmates, and you can't quite fit in anymore when you go back. So you have to rethink your career options. And you may be in a similar position right now, or when you apply to jobs, you may feel that the friends that you had who are applying to similar jobs, like you might not be able to talk about the same things anymore. The experience that you had in the United States has changed you in many ways. But I really enjoyed Evelyn's talk about I had a plan, and then and then things didn't quite work out the way you had envisioned. But in the end, it worked out nicely. And you had said that you explored a lot of things in your college where each of them didn't connect to an ultimate goal. But in the end, when you take a step back, overall, it makes sense. And you had also said that it seemed like it really was a period of self-reflection. So I want to ask about when you had to change course. And sometimes that takes a lot of courage because even when you know in your heart that something doesn't quite feel right, it's really hard to say, actually, I'm going to change my major, or actually, I'm going to start applying to these jobs, even though I made a huge network and I asked so many people for references in this field. So how do you know what's right, and how do you start pursuing that? I'm going to start with Evelyn, and to change it up, go to Kira, and then you go. Yeah, okay.
So that's a really loaded question. So yes, I think I've definitely changed course many times. There were so I was in Japan for 6 years, and so big chunk of my 20s basically, and there were many times where I doubted myself. I wasn't really sure if I should, be there, remain there, if I should continue in my current job, especially when I was trying to transition from teaching into communications. It took me, I would say, more or less about a year to actually get hired at the PR agency. So there was many times where I just really wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, but something was keeping me there. I would go home, come back to California about once or twice a year, and every time I still wanted to go back to Japan. So I knew that when there was a time when I was home and it was really difficult to leave and I didn't really want to leave, then maybe that was the time where I would actually need to move back to the States. So going back to the question, changing course, I would say kind of most recently, I basically changed my course when I decided to move back. So I moved back in August, and I decided that I needed to develop additional skills in order to progress in my career and to be where I wanted to be, which eventually was in a management position in some kind of organization, institution, company. And I wasn't going to be able to do that in Japan. And I also had felt like my experience there was very full. I had been able to build a life there. I knew that I could survive there on my own, develop networks there. And they would still be there even if I moved back, because if you make an effort to remain connected, you can maintain those relationships and they can still, develop and flower and grow. So I knew that wouldn't all disappear if I decided to move back. But
aside from all of the self-doubt, I think that I've always known that my decisions that I end up making are the right ones for me. Your friends, your colleagues might be doing something different, and people might, you'll ask people for advice, whether it's mentors, teachers, professors, family, friends, whoever it may be. But I think at the end of the day, you really need to look inside of yourself and ask yourself those hard questions and go with your gut instinct. So I think that's what I've always done. And in the summer, kind of in the months leading up to before moving back, I had asked myself those questions, and I knew that it was kind of the right timing was right for me to come home. So just believe in yourself and trust yourself that you're making the right decision. I mean, especially if historically those decisions have always worked out, which they had in my case. I decided to move to Japan, and that worked out. The major that I had selected in undergrad, I don't necessarily apply it in my job, but it brought about the study abroad opportunity. It was a great experience. So hope that's helpful.
So the question's about changing course and some of the things that I thought about. Okay. So let's see. I think the main thing that I thought about, what small changes in course or really big ones depending, and I can talk about those, but just not being afraid of making a mistake, and that even if it is a mistake and something doesn't work out, that I'll recover from it, and that I always have, and there's always a solution. So not letting the fear sort of dictate the decision that I'm making at that point, because there will be many other decisions that I'll have to make along the way. So there's always an opportunity to change course. Life is always changing. So I try to have that sort of lightness about it so that I don't sort of have some paralysis when I'm trying to make a decision, because that can happen. So I'll say a more recent change is, so I'm a fifth year now at my law firm, and why that's significant is because once you hit a certain seniority at a law firm, you begin to manage all of your cases, and that's a really big responsibility. Up till now, I would say, the types of jobs that I've had, leadership roles, I've always sort of had like a backup person, someone who, if things really went bad, that person would be there to help me, right? And more, I feel like I'm that person, that if things go bad, well, it's on me. And that's a bit scary. But what I had to realize was any mistake that I make, any decision that might put us in the wrong direction, I can recover from. There's nothing that I can't fix. It's just a matter of me thinking of a solution and being proactive and communicating and thinking of all the skills that I've acquired up till this point that'll help me recover from that. So that's a recent sort of, in changing course in my career, where I'm now sort of the leader, and I have people that I manage, and they're looking to me as the backstop. They're looking to me like, oh, what do I do? Help me, And so that's somewhat new and scary, but I try to have some, lightness to it, and that it's all manageable. And if history dictates sort of what will happen next, it'll be fine. No one's gonna die. As I always tell myself, no one's gonna die. You're not a doctor. You're a lawyer. Don't get crazy. So now let me talk about changing course. Maybe that's more applicable to your day-to-day in undergrad. So I majored in economics, and UCSD has a great sort of major called international relations or international studies. They might have changed the name since I was there, but it allowed you to sort of focus on a major area. So I focused on economics, and then you could have like a sub area of study. So that was Japanese studies for me. I'm half Japanese, and I did not grow up speaking Japanese at home, but I had always had an interest in learning the language and studying abroad. And so I did study abroad for a year in Kyoto at Doshisha Daigaku, and had an incredible time. If anyone has been to Kyoto, it's a wonderful place to live. Oh, really? And you're at UC San Diego, so we're a match. So that major, right, economics, Japanese studies, you're like, why'd you become a lawyer? Doesn't seem very related. But nonetheless, when I graduated, I think that mixture of courses that I took gave me a global perspective, and I wanted to be a part of a bigger discussion. I wanted to have sort of the skills to be able to be an advocate, right? And to effectuate change. I didn't want to be just, a cog in the system, just sort of churning out work. Although, I could have done that. But I wanted to be a participant, an active participant. So a legal degree was something that I explored. And how I landed on development really, I think, comes down to like my involvement in the community, and I really do enjoy working with community groups and actually changing the community for the better. And that's essentially what my work entails. So transitioning from like economics, Japanese studies to law was a bit scary. I was like, how is this going to work out? Will a law school really accept me with this type of, I don't have pre-law. A lot of people studied pre-law or poli-sci, or they knew lawyers. I really was just sort of out left wing here. But that didn't discourage me because I think, I knew it was the right path to have the type of future career that I wanted. So whether that was being a land use attorney as I am today, or for example, not even really being a practicing attorney, if I wanted to get into politics, or if I wanted to, just work for like the UN, who knows? But having the skills that like a law degree provides, I thought, oh, that sounds about right. Like that's what I want to do. So let's just go that way. And it all worked out. So I think I've always sort of applied to sort of just like, we'll figure it out, because letting this sort of fear, just sort of prevent you from pursuing something that you want, it's like life is too short. Figure it out. Yeah.
So I had to change my courses 4 years ago when I moved back to the States. And this time I didn't move back to States because I wanted to, because my husband's job. So so after working for American medical company, that was my first job, I moved on to working for ambassador at the Royal Embassy of Saudi Arabia in Tokyo. And I thought that was my lifelong career. I thought I was going to work there for a long time. And then this move happened, and I was very, very upset. So I moved back to the States and took a little break. But I wasn't type of stay-home kind of wife. So I decided to go back to looking for a job. And I got a job at Mizuho Bank, and I was doing foreign exchange and doing loans for a Japanese company in the United States. I just didn't quite feel like it was the right job for me. And then I ran into this person who worked for foreign ministry that I work very close to back in Tokyo, in LA, and talked to him about how I enjoy my job very much, but this is not where I want to go in the next 5 years or 10 years. And then 5 months later, I got a call from him saying that there's this position opening that you might be interested in, which was this job. And I really enjoy what I do right now. So I think my advice is never burn bridges.
You can be the smartest person at school, but if people don't like you, they don't want to work with you. So you want to be always, have a good relationship with anybody, your classmate, your neighbors, your professor, anybody. And hopefully that would lead you to a right position in the future. So just have, don't burn bridges and keep having good relationship.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that. Me too. I think I've had to change courses quite a bit. And so when I graduated college, just to backtrack. So I lived in the US when I was smaller. And then from 9 to 15 years old, I was in Japan. But during that time, I had a lot of difficulty fitting in. And it was only after those challenging times that I learned that kikokushijo typically, or not typically, but a lot of them have difficulty fitting back into the United States. I'm sorry, fitting back into Japan. But back then, when I was undergoing that, I thought, I was 100% at fault. And I'm sure it was, like, I'm a weird person or whatnot. But back then, I really didn't think that there were external factors that I could not have known. So I went back when I was in third grade um, and yeah, I spent 6 years in Japan. And for high school, I came back to the United States. But I felt like I feel much more at home in the U.S. I feel more comfortable. I could be myself. But after graduating college in the U.S., I wanted to pursue a career in the U.S. And I felt like, well, yeah, I'm Japanese and I speak Japanese very well, but I shouldn't rely on that. Like I should be able to work entirely as a I don't know, as someone who's like born and raised in the United States. But I felt like it was really, really difficult to pursue a career in that sense. And eventually, the first job that I got out of college was at the U.S. At the Embassy of Japan in Washington D.C., working in communications. But it took quite a few months to reach that point. I kept applying and applying and applying to journalism jobs that had nothing to do with Japan. And finally, I came to the realization that I should be proud of my heritage. I should be proud of the language skills and experience that I built in Japan. And so I think the changing course part is a lot of like self-realization and also being happy with who you are and realizing that some of your past experiences, even if they're not necessarily positive, can work out for the better. And I also wanted to ask the panelists about future aspirations. Some of you shared it a little bit, but we can't ever rest. We have to continue working hard, and some of that requires like longer hours in the office, but also I think to some degree working on the side too. Like you might look at different opportunities, not necessarily like new jobs, but different opportunities like different skills, leadership skills, etc. while you're at home or in other capacities. I was wondering if you could share that, like where you want to go and what kind of things you do to develop your skills.
So I have a 1-year-old baby. So I'm new mother and I'm working really hard balancing work and being a mother right now. But in the future, I would like to get involved more in U.S. Japan organization outside of my work and continue supporting those relationships using my experience. Don't have any specific skill that I'm working on right now, or I'm just right now, to be honest, I'm really focusing on doing good job at work and being a good mother. It's quite difficult. Oops. However, yes, I like to continue working for U.S. Japan relations, and then also because I have a background in being involved with Middle East countries, I think it's for me it's good for me to start exploring maybe other ethnic groups in LA, reaching out to them and getting a little more involved.
So Shuri mentioned having a lot of self-realizations, and I think the one that I had before moving back was that I wanted to go back to school.
And that's one of the major reasons why I decided to move back. So right now I'm in the process of applying to some graduate school programs. And I actually decided that I wanted to go back into education, not necessarily in a teaching role, but perhaps in more of a management, administrative role. So that's what I'm currently doing right now. And as far as, skills or activities that I'm currently participating in, I've kept in touch with some of the students that I continue to teach throughout my time in Japan. So we're trying to arrange some online lessons. And then I'm also still quite involved with the U.S. Japan Council. I think the council itself really enhanced my experience in Japan. And to be honest, I don't think I would have stayed there that long if it wasn't for the USJC. I met so many wonderful people who I shared so much with, especially with the Emerging Leaders program. It was just kind of mind boggling to meet these 11 other individuals who you have such a similar experience to, the way that you grew up. And, we bonded and connected, as I'm sure you all have, in a matter of hours, really. So it's really an incredible experience. So I encourage you to keep in touch with each other. So I've also tried to stay connected with that network, and especially moving back to Southern California, it's a completely different membership here than it was in Japan. So that's what I'm doing now.
Congratulations. That sounds exciting. Are you looking to stay in Los Angeles?
I love California.
Yeah. Cool. So aspirations. Professionally, large law firms don't have very many female, what they call partners. A partner of a law firm is someone who has been at the law firm for a significant amount of time and been promoted through the ranks, and is elected by the members of the partnership to basically buy in and become a part owner of the law firm. So it's a very significant accomplishment, and takes a lot of time. You essentially start your own practice, your own sort of business within the law firm. So because of the sort of lack of females partners at most of the large law firms in the country, in particular women of diverse women, so women like me, I guess. I have a personal goal to try to make partner at a law firm. And that's a very long-term goal. It can typically take more than 10 years to become a partner at a law firm. But I'm not discouraged by the fact that there is a lack of women in my practice. I have a lot of sort of support from the men that I work with. And there are a few women partners at my law firm, and we have a affinity group called the Women Lawyers Group, which I co-chair at my firm, and really trying to hire and retain women in the legal industry. So professionally, I guess that's an aspiration, a very long-term aspiration of my own. But one thing I do is set short-term goals to help me get there, because that long-term goal is not attainable without meeting certain milestones along the way, and being realistic about what it will take to get there. So some of the short-term things that I do, I try to look for leadership opportunities in the community, legal or non-legal, to help me build the sort of skills that I'll need to lead my own practice. Some of the things that I do right now, so there's an organization called the Japanese American Bar Association. It's an organization here in Los Angeles, comprised of lawyers who most of them have Japanese descent, but there's a lot of non-Japanese members. And I'm on their board of governors. I'm the treasurer of the organization, and I have been for the past 2 years. And so that has allowed me as a young lawyer to engage with other lawyers from my community. I would say I'm probably one of the younger attorneys who sits on the board of governors. So it's an honor to be a part of it and be elected to that position. But I learn a lot, from working with these individuals who have been practicing for, as long as I've been alive. So that's one thing that I've done to sort of move myself towards my long-term goal. I've also recently joined the steering committee here in Los Angeles for U.S. Japan Council. So we have a local committee for the city of LA to help us stay active in our U.S. Japan Council activities. So I've tried to engage through that. And then the Emerging Leaders Program hosts a U40 event. They just hosted one last year, and we're planning for this year's event. And so I'm also active with that sort of planning committee. And really, that opportunity is just to help me stay involved with the organization, but as well as my colleagues like Evelyn, sort of like-minded folks from different industries, so we can all sort of grow up as a family and learn from each other's experiences. And I would agree with my fellow panelists that, not only professionally, but sort of a life goal I think that I've had is to remain balanced. Because, notwithstanding your professional accomplishments, unless you have the sort of work-life balance and you can have a family eventually and, all of the things that matter to you as a whole person, really none of the professional accomplishments truly matter. So I've also tried to focus on personal wellness, which is something I've neglected, I think, as a law student and as a young lawyer. I do work long hours, but trying to refocus on personal care and wellness is another aspiration of mine.
Thank you so much. So this is the last question that I have for the panelists. This was addressed a little bit during Irene's talk as well, but I think the current political changes and implications that come from it is something that you might feel is a little bit tough for you studying in the United States. So I wanted to ask if you all have words of encouragement for the next few months, and also advice on how the students might continue to contribute to U.S.-Japan relations once they've gone back to Japan.
So when I was studying in college, that's when 9/11 happened. And I know that a lot of my friends who are from Middle East have a difficulty staying here in the United States studying. And then I see something, shouldn't say similar, but a little bit similar situation right now. What's happening in the U.S. with the presidency and everything. I would say this, whether it's a good, trying to stay out of political stuff, but just using this opportunity to keep focusing on what's matter to you, and also being involved to the organizations such as USJC, to connecting between two different countries. I think that's very important thing that you can do during this time of the year.
I would say feel empowered by your experience, and don't be afraid or shy about sharing your experience when you go back to Japan. And I know it's not always rosy. You're here for a year. You're going to experience some hardship and some challenges. So talk about those too. Don't just talk about all of the positive stuff, but talk about how you managed to make it through those difficulties. Don't give up if you have a dream. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I really do believe that when there's a will, there's a way to make it happen. Of course, it might take longer than were planning or expecting, but it's something if it's something that you truly want, you'll find a way to make it happen. And also, if you really want to maintain your English and keep up with it, don't be afraid to use it in Japan. I know in Japan, it's Japan, so everyone speaks Japanese, but especially if you're close to a larger city or if you're in a larger city, I actually met more people in Tokyo from other countries than I ever had living in California. So there's plenty of opportunities to meet and to engage with non-Japanese, students, travelers, people who are living and working there. So try to plug into those networks. I mean, be cautious sometimes, but there's definitely opportunities, I think, to maintain your English if you do end up going to Japan, and in between coming back to the U.S.
So you folks have one more semester left here, right? You guys end in about June or July. So you have quite a bit of time to sort of engage with your campus organizations and student body. So to your question, Shiori-san, about sort of how to deal with the current political climate here in the U.S. as an exchange student, I think you should feel empowered by the fact that you are here in the U.S. with student organizations who can help you sort of think through some of the issues that you might be seeing on the news. I think it's, as a person not from the US, you have a very interesting perspective that you can contribute to the discussion as well. So don't be afraid to sort of share your ideas, your thinking on some of the issues out there, because I think what's really great about our country is our ability to have that dialogue and have a variety of different opinions. So don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to sort of express that in an open sort of dialogue with your campus. And you'll see that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you to participate. And if you're too shy, or maybe you don't really know where you stand, sometimes just attending debates or attending community town hall meetings and listening to the different sides can be a very illuminating experience. So while you're here in the US, I would encourage you to participate in those sort of activities. And that can sort of help you understand some of the things you might be seeing on the news. And going back home after you're done with your study abroad, how to maintain the sort of U.S.-Japan relations and your passion for that. Look for small goals that you can make. I think sometimes it's a bit daunting just to say, well, practice your English when you go back and try to maintain relationships that you've acquired here in the U.S. I read an article about questolutions. It's questions and a resolution mixed together, questolutions. And there are studies that show if you set small goals instead of a big goal. Like say, I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, that's a very big goal. How do you do that? Well, a questolution would be, what can I do to lose 20 pounds? Well, every day I could walk around my block for 15 minutes, and I'll do that. And that will get you closer to your goal. Instead of thinking, oh, I got to lose 20 pounds, how am I going to do that? So if your goal is to maintain your English when you return, present a question to yourself. And what can you do incrementally to maintain your English? So set a date. Every Tuesday, I'm going to meet at a coffee shop with my friend so-and-so, and we're going to push ourselves to speak in English for 15 minutes. And then we can talk in Japanese for 30 minutes and we'll go home. That's something very bite-sized, very attainable. And I think you'll feel good if you can say that, well, how have I, what have I done over the past 6 months that have helped me to, maintain my English? Oh, well, I do these little meetups. So that's one thing. Maintaining relationships, I think it's so easy now through social media to stay in touch. So I'm hoping that you can use social media to stay in touch with U.S. Japan Council, as well as your campuses. And I would encourage you to sort of be like a cheerleader, for your experience here in the U.S. So encourage your peers who may not have had the opportunity to study abroad, encourage them to study abroad. Talk about the good and the bad, right? Because even with some of the challenges, I'm sure you'll find that there are great lessons that you've learned and skills that you've acquired through those challenges. So speak openly about that, share with your peers, and try to think of it as your duty to encourage your friends back home to study abroad. Maybe not in the U.S., anywhere really. Just try to broaden their global perspective. So take it upon yourself, I think, to be that advocate as well.
Thank you so much. That was really valuable advice. And I feel like I learned from all three of you. It's really important to focus on your academics and your wonderful experience here. And of course, as an organization that works on people-to-people relations, it's really important to hear how we can be entrenched in the community, both here while you're in the United States and also when you go back to Japan. And of course, the Quest Solutions word, that's great. I've never heard of that, but I think that's... Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you could, yeah, we'll forward it to you. That would be really great. And of course, being a cheerleader, I think for myself and I think for the panelists as well, in fact, giving advice or giving suggestions to others makes us learn more about ourselves and make us want to live up to our own expectations and what we tell others. So I think this has been a really great experience. And we have about 20 more minutes for you to ask questions to them. So if you have anything, please ask.
And we have a microphone, so we can hear the questions. Let me see. Oh, yes.
Thank you for sharing your impressive experience. And I have a dream since when I was a junior high school student, and which is to be a English teacher in Japan. So my question is, I've been like focusing that dream for a long time, like for half of my life so far, but like I'm kind of like at the end of my like point to be a teacher, like because I'm senior and I want to be a graduate school student too. But after that, like I'm going to apply for that job actually. So, but I don't want to be like that because I've been focusing on that job and I didn't look for any other job. So I'm kind of want to like explore more and more, like especially after I came here, because American is more like relaxed about like job hunting. You don't need to be, rush to find what you want to do like for life. So like I want to hear like any kind of advice to explore what you want to do or like how to like look for what you want to do.
Did you want to ask somebody in particular? Or?
Any of you.
Evelyn, do you want to start since you were interested in teaching?
So right after graduation, I moved up to San Francisco for that kind of teaching assistant position for the ESL students. And at that point, I had a goal, right? I wanted to go to Japan to work, but I actually had a year between graduation and between moving to Japan. So I graduated in June and then in 2009, and then I moved June 2010 to Tokyo. So I did that teaching internship, and then, like I mentioned, I explored kind of other areas. So I was working in hospitality, and at the same time, I was actually commuting into LA, and I had an internship for a fashion showroom. And so I was kind of learning about sales as well, because I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I felt like that was a good time to explore those interests until I got the opportunity to move to Japan. So if you have that time, I know in Japan there's both societal and cultural pressure to enter, prestigious company right after graduation. And it's a really big deal, right? Because you're all going through this experience together. It's a shared experience. So I know it's difficult to kind of go against the grain. And a lot of my friends in school, too, they had jobs right out of college, whether they were engineers or if they were econ majors, going to government related agencies. One of my closest friends was planning to go to medical school, law school. So a lot of people had it figured out. I didn't have it figured out yet. And then, fast forward 6 years, there I was again, kind of contemplating, well, what is this what I really want to do? Is this really what is making me happy? And do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like I'm being a kind of a true global citizen? Because what was most important to me was actually to help people. That's what I realized. I think in the different positions that I had after school, and to be able to make some kind of positive social impact. So if I wasn't necessarily doing that through my day job, I could do it through other activities like being involved with the U.S. Japan Council or finding ways to volunteer within the community that I was living with or living in. So after kind of realizing that, that's kind of when I was like, okay, I need to, make a decision whether I want to stay in Japan and, go to school here or whether I want to return back to the States. So is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Did you want to add anything?
I can't see your name tag, but you're Masumi? Okay. Thank you for your question. In addition to what Evelyn shared, I think whenever I had issues, and I still do have issues with my career sometimes too, I question like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is so hard. Should I do something else? And I mean, I think we're fortunate here in the States that there's flexibility your whole career to change course. And I understand that that may not be the case in Japan. So I hear the sort of worry that you have right now. What I've done in those cases is I've called on my mentors, and I have a few mentors that I've been lucky to sort of maintain relationships with, and I call them up and I ask them to, coffee, and I just unload on them, and I share all of the insecurities I have, and ask for their sincere advice, and it's always helped. It may not be the answer, but it's always helped to hear a different perspective, because sometimes I feel so like trapped in my mind, and if you spend that time just with yourself, you're not going to come up with a different answer a lot of times. So in addition to what Evelyn shared, I think talk to people, talk to your grandparents, talk to your parents, talk to your your siblings, your friends, teachers. If you've acquired, professional mentors along the way, talk to them, because those are the folks that will be honest with you, and it might help to flesh out some of the thoughts you're having about your career decisions. So I think that's one piece of advice that I would add.
I think I second what Kira said too. You are fortunate to be chosen for this scholarship student, and you have an opportunity to meet different kind of people who has so many connection. So find your mentor if you don't have one right now, and talk to them, and then I think that would lead you to wherever you may.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you for interesting story of each you guys. And I have one question about what I should do just after the graduation. one of the reasons I came here, I decided to come here to study here is like to consider about my future. And I've been like dreaming of working at United Nations or like that kind of organization to help the international like peaceful thing. But like the all the profession requires me like at least like taking master course or PhD. And but like so I'd like to know like your opinion, like the benefit or not benefit, like the good thing or bad thing, like to um go to graduate school immediately after like the graduation of undergraduate, or like the as you did, like just the having a off, or like the at once like having a job, and then go to the like graduate school. I not sure I have which way I have to take now, and I'm thinking still, and then but I have to decide like by August or like the. So I wanna like hear your opinion, you guys' opinion, like.
Sorry, before I give it to the panelists, I was just going to hog the mic for a second. I didn't put it in the bio, but I actually was interested in going to the United Nations or working at an international organization after my first job. And that was one of the reasons I applied to grad school. And as you said, you always see like master's degree required. And I was interested in communications job. And they always said like master's degrees in journalism or master's degree in international affairs. So I decided to get both. It was like a dual degree program in New York at Columbia. And during that time, I joined a network called the Kokuren Forum, which you may know. And of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a website where they post all the international job openings. I think it's called IRC, the International Resource Center or Recruitment Center or something like that. And they're constantly recruiting Japanese people. Here, where I'm from in DC, the World Bank is always looking for Japanese people too. So it's really nice to be able to take advantage of that because the Japanese government is always trying to send more Japanese people there. But what I can also say is that a field experience is really, really important. So I took 2 internships. One was at the New York headquarters. It's called DPI, the Department of Public Information. I also did an internship in Kosovo with UNDP, the United Nations Development Program. And the UNDP one was really on the field. And it was about a year after Kosovo became independent, like it became a country. So that was really interesting to think about, like what it means to be a country. Like if you say, I'm a country, are you a country? Or like, do you have to be recognized by the UN or the EU? So I really encourage you to do internships. Oh, and sorry to answer your question. I think it's important to work first because like when you go to grad school, you'll be surrounded by there will be people who came straight out of school, but when you have worked, you have more to contribute in terms of like questions, in terms of all the books you read. So I think it's really important to work ahead of time. Okay, sorry. Does anybody else want to?
I don't know that I can add much more. That was a perfect answer. I completely agree that taking time to work in the field, especially if you have an interest and focusing that internship or paid position in the area that you plan on pursuing, I think that's a really good idea. One, because it will help you contribute to your graduate program discussions. But secondly, what if you don't like it, right? What if you don't like it? That's another thing to consider because you only sort of hypothetically think you're interested in working for the UN, for example. But say you do an internship and you spend, a few months doing that and you realize, well, actually, I'm more interested in this or that, but you won't know until you have that personal experience. So I think that's a second reason. And then third, I think you're going to meet a lot of people. And once you grow your network, you'll have a better chance of placement after you get through your master's program. So look at that as an opportunity to grow your personal network in the area.
I just want to add one quick thing. If you haven't already, and if you're, unsure about whether or not to try applying for these master's programs, and if your goal is to work at the UN, see if you can do informational interviews find someone in your network, maybe who already works at the UN, or maybe a professor can help connect you with someone, because that will really give you a better idea of what the day-to-day work looks like. And if that's something that you really want to be doing, and then they can also, in addition to that, kind of shed light on, what skills or prerequisites are actually required to do that type of work. So that may be something you might want to look into.
I think you guys summed it up beautifully, so I have nothing to add.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Anybody? Yes.
Your experience. I'm Yuri. I'm majoring in law and junior. And I have a question for Kirsten and Everinson. Two questions. Kirsten mentioned focusing on skills is really important, like communication skills, writing, reading, and having a confidence. But I really want to ask how to have a big confidence for myself or for your own self. And also for Everinson, I think you said like you did not get the opportunity to JET program, but you kept trying to explore your interest and also trying to find different opportunities. And I think it's also one of the great skills. And I want to ask how you built it.
So I'll address your question about gaining confidence. I would say that as an undergraduate student, if you have a chance to take on leadership roles, student organizations in class, for example, I think that's a really great opportunity to sort of test yourself and having to take the lead, make decisions, speak in front of the public. I think those are great opportunities for you to gain confidence. I would say, in addition to that, identify something that you're afraid of, something that makes you very nervous. Where are you most, uncomfortable? A lot of people aren't uncomfortable speaking in public, but I just use that one because it's a very common one. But, are you uncomfortable writing in English? Well, then practice writing in English. Are you uncomfortable speaking English to, native English speakers? Well, practice speaking with, just pushing yourself, I think, in those sort of uncomfortable situations can help you gain confidence, because sort of recovering from the mistakes and getting better and better incrementally, I think will help you with those certain insecurities. So I use leadership opportunities because I think that's where you're really tested, right? People are looking to you to sort of tell us what to do. And so you have to be well prepared, right? And you have to exude confidence so people want to be led by you and they'll follow. So I hope that answers your question.
So just to clarify, your question is kind of how did I get through that time of and the disappointment of not getting in? Kind of desire to don't give up. Okay, so the economy was not in an ideal state when I graduated. It was the middle of the global financial crisis. So the job market was actually not very good for college graduates. And I think that kind of through the different kind of job opportunities that I had taken, I realized that I wasn't as passionate about what I was doing as about going to Japan. So I think that desire, it never really wavered. I had that kind of fire was still in me of wanting to go there. And I think also, I'm sure some of you have experience in sports. So growing up, I actually was a figure skater for 10 years. And I think that developing kind of that work ethic and having the determination of falling and getting up, and if you're in a competition, there was one in particular where I fell on every single jump. I missed every single element in the program. So it was a nightmare. But I think sports kind of really built that into me of that attitude of I'm not going to give up just because it didn't happen the first time. And then, you don't only get that from sports. There's other ways that you can kind of develop that kind of work ethic. But I would say that those were kind of the two main things is just having the attitude, being positive that I could make it happen. And then, yeah, just trying again. If you don't try, you never know. And I think that's a true statement. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody last question? Okay. Okay, sorry, hold on for the mic.
Okay. Yeah, it was really mind-blowing experience for me. I think it's mainly for the Yuiko-san, I guess. But as for like Japanese, I'm kind of experienced that kind of same or similar the time right now. Like I'm kind of thinking, what should I do to being fit in the Japanese culture again, or to be myself? I mean, like especially for the job, I'm kind of thinking that to going to the Japanese hierarchical society and work as a typical Japanese businesswoman, or to become more like to work as a like more freely. Sorry, and I want to ask, since you kind of decided to not to fit in the Japanese society, right? So was it really difficult for you to make the decision, or like how to overcome that situation?
Well, first, I try my best to fit into Japanese society, and then I realized that that's not who I am. All those experiences that I have in the United States change who I am, and I feel like I'm more global citizen, rather than just the Japanese person who never got out of Japan. So I don't think you need to change. You should probably be who you are and find a job that who understand you, who you are. I think that's you have to keep remembering that. You know, I think I think it's great that some people just stay in one country and then keep focusing on their small issues, but you have a big global perspective now, so you should be proud of yourself and be confident and trying to find job or wherever company that who understand you, who value your perspective.